Okay, so I just mentioned just now, it's not quite, I think I have to do another one like that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so we need to do one over here. And I kind of mentioned a little thing called experiential mind. That was the first thing I came up with my friends. It was the idea of getting together. You didn't know what it was that you were going to decide to do. Okay, so you brought your tenor, people turn up. There's trust relationships. Everybody knows somebody because they've been invited. Okay, and they brought their money, and then they decide what we're going to do with this money. You know, a little thing to bond, break the ice, and then you make your decision, and then you go ahead and do it. It means an experiential night. It's all to do with spontaneity, and it's all to do with the different group, the unique group that you've got. Well, the form of that in business, I translated into business, was an action cycle. An action cycle. Now that is a little bit more advanced because it involves money flow, okay, and it's about getting results, okay, outside of hierarchies. So the biggest problem forming these hierarchies is there are silos, okay, and collaboration is nearly always between organizations, and that takes a hell of a lot of negotiation. Whereas what action cycles do is it creates a kind of API. It's like a way for people to move and interact and share and work together with across organizations. So within an hour, you have to decide what can be done by next week. Okay, and you've got to get to not only go to achieve to get consensus on a just beyond realistic objective, you've also got to commit to it. And if you commit to it, people go back into their companies and organizations, departments, and so on and so forth, or they're free-forming individuals, you know, floating around. And they go back and then they try to achieve it in their respective organizations. And thus, there is access to problems that are out with these organizations. Okay? Those organizations can only reach certain levels of problem. And there's a hell of a lot that are out with that. It's like non-linear. Organizations, because of the hierarchy, can kind of work with linear levels of problem. But the non-linear levels of problems, the ones that we find really difficult, okay, what are we talking about? Well, we're talking the ones that are leading to environmental disaster. Okay, those ones, you know, like water, okay, cycle problems. You know, the ice caps melting, that kind of level of problem that it's the water doesn't obey the rules about the boundaries of political boundaries. You know, we had problems with acid rain and so on and so forth in Europe and in America. I think that's been reduced somewhat. I haven't heard about acid rain too much, but we certainly have acidification of the oceans and salination of, for example, ground, you know, because of the fertilizing, artificial fertilizing of the years. So we've got major problems that, and those are kind of like the physical ones, and then you've got psychosocial ones, to do with poverty, different levels of poverty in our countries, and equality, racism. How do you get rid of racism? Oh, I know, we're going to employ a bunch of people to get rid of it. Okay. Oh, we're going to get a bunch of famous people to, you know, to, bad racism, bad, okay, possibly. Okay, these things are all good, but do they actually get to the root of the problem? No. Okay, and we need to get to the root of the problem through our relationships. Okay, first social fact, we have to acknowledge our concurrency. Second social fact, we've got to move money in a slightly different way. And we haven't quite got to the third social fact. It's something to do with all these things. So the action cycle is a way for people to get together, collaborate in an A state. If it's a C state, that's what that is. That's what the normal state is. So it's trying to get us to operate in a C state way. Okay, in an A state way, which is effectively horizontal. Okay. Now the action cycle is in business. Now you might think that's economics. No, that's almost like an applied bit of maths, okay, and a psychosocial effect. It's right, okay. This is business. This is more to do with between us, individually, personally. How do we get together, and how do we make decisions to get together? small groups and then large groups across, so we can actually, small decisions together, what's going to happen by next week with small groups of us, but what about if we have hundreds or thousands or millions? A million of us. No, we're not, well, actually, if we had a million, when we have a million, we might be able to make a collective decision. Maybe that's what I should be considering for these recordings, because my friend has mentioned this. Okay, we need to be a little bit clearer. Maybe that's what I need to do. Okay, so can we have some goals here, some kind of targets, which fits in with our third social fact? Okay, let's think about that. Goals. Purpose. Okay, the purpose, a collective purpose. Because the first social fact is something you do mentally. The second social fact is something you share intersubjectively. And the third social fact is the effect of all of this, the effect of all these people. Whether it's 10 people, whether it's 1 million people, what's the effect of all these people? What is the point of all this money flow? What is the point of listening to anything? What is the point of doing anything? Okay? And it's something to do with purpose. And because of the fact we're operating in this kind of slightly new modality, we're going for a collective purpose. Okay? We're not part of any kind of company. There's no bounded entity. There's no category. You're not part of a company. You're not part of a movement even. Okay? We're not interested in any of these things. Any kind of bounded. We're not solid. Neither are we bounded by any external form. Okay? It is like a network, I guess, but that's a bit static. Okay, so we want a temporal fluid network. What does that mean? Well, think something like murmuration. Murmuration. Like murmuration. Okay, or herding. Okay, herding is not so good because we kind of think it's a bit mindless. Okay, but we're actually talking about intelligent herding. Smart herding even. Okay, there's a new term for us. Right, action cycles there. Execute is in maths. I'm going to describe that. Maths. Oops. Mathematics. Now, mathematics is the queen of sciences, they've said. The queen of sciences. What we have to do is we have to free this person, this queen, because it's in thrall, it's imprisoned by the king that is science. The king that is in science and control. Okay? Because mathematics has evolved from the study of objects mostly, from counting things. And we have this misunderstanding that we think that mathematics has to be like this, and it's not. Okay, it's not just about triangles, and triangles build bridges. It's not about, calculus. Oh, look, we can do calculus, so therefore we can study how cannonballs move, and we can get man on the moon using calculus. Fantastic. So mathematics, we've developed these tools and techniques in order to get more control of our physical world. And that's true in terms of physics, okay, in terms of getting a man on the moon, or a woman, or a robot, or maybe a dog at some point, or onto Mars, okay, fine. But in terms, and chemistry, we're pretty good at that too. But in the battery technologies, it's just gone leaps and bounds over that because of Elon Musk mostly. But in biology, we've got a lot of understanding of a lot of systems, but I guess that's getting a bit tricky. We don't quite know. We kind of understand the cycles, but it's trickier. Hormones, body systems, it starts getting quite complex, and we're not very good at those. We're not very good at complex networks, complex feedback loops, and especially social. And you can tell socially, we're still operating hierarchies. Okay, we're still using money that we invented 3,000 years ago. I think we need time for an upgrade. All right, that's the Sqale again. Okay, so XQ is, mathematics is in thrall. It's been used to study of physical objects and physics and so on, so the natural sciences. However, it's also got this pure form, okay, pure mathematics. And you'll see that in departments, academic. They're just interested in the symbolic manipulation. If you remember at school, experience at school, algebra, you just have some symbols, numbers, you manipulate them and you get the answer. What is the answer about? Who cares? Okay, it's the answer, it's correct. We've just resolved a problem and we've got a solution. Does it refer to anything in physical reality? No. But it's symbolic and it's kind of entertaining and it works. Okay, and it's some kind of mental exercise. And that kind of algebra has been very useful again in the employ of physics and so on and so forth. Okay, in most of the techniques, even algebraically, pure math has been used in physics. However, there's a third way of thinking about this. Mathematics requires a person to do it. Okay, it doesn't actually, because you can get computers doing symbolic maths, okay, and doing proofs and so on and so forth. However, when we're doing it in school, when I was doing it in education, when I was a teacher, when I was a kid, when we were all kids, we sit there and we actually do maths. And the question is, what in our minds is doing the maths? Okay, because it's not just a matter of, oh, it's just symbolic. Well, there's somebody doing this. What? In the same way that I'm talking and appropriated my lips and my tongue, which was originally for eating and breathing, here I am appropriating it in order to communicate. Okay, so similarly, there's parts of our brain that I think are related to like hunting, okay, hunting, which is like looking for food, or, gathering, looking for berries and so on and so forth, or problem solving of various practical natures. But wait a minute, that psychology can be used just to sit there and do symbolic manipulation. So it's an appropriation, not of a physical matter, but of our psychological structures that we have evolved. Okay. Now that is XQ. It's the internal state of whatever it is that's going on in our minds to be able to do any mathematics. And this might help us, not only with education, as it did with me, so I could explain why fractions and negative numbers and everything else works. And this gives us a little bit of a insight into going, wait a minute, what's a negative number? Because if we know what a negative number is and how we operate it, and the biases that it inherently has, i.e. the traditional way of understanding negative numbers as being an opposite, it means we start thinking about, well, politics, okay? Politics, all right, in education. I'm a bit politics here. That's interesting. Okay, it's probably just that, okay? That's interesting. Politics, I'm going to have to question it. Where's the politics? Politics! Politics! Well, it's kind of based a bit on how we're doing education, business. That's interesting. Okay. But going back to this, sorry, that's just completely blown my mind. Alright, XQ, mathematics. So if we're looking at negative numbers, and we say this idea of opposition has meant, it's had implications. The development of negative number, like 200, 300 years ago, the actual invention of going, well, we'll put a little symbol in front of that 7. It means that we could abstract, we could depersonalize debt. Okay, so you can represent, I owe somebody £7, Bob, and I owe Mary £3. Fine. Now, before we had this kind of negative number, a nice simple negative number, and then being able to do the arithmetic on negative numbers in a stable way, basically I knew Bob and I owed him 7, and I owed Mary 3, and maybe somebody else owed me. Okay, and so we have these relationships, known relationships. And so money wasn't just a method of exchange, it was also a balance of a relationship, which we attempt to kind of keep balanced, okay, to some extent. However, once we had these negatives in the arithmetic that were stable and trustworthy, we could just simply add them. I owe £10. To whom? People. And because that becomes people, it becomes depersonalized. And that's the world we're living in now. We're living in a world where most of the money that's floating around is debt. What does that mean? It just means it's got a negative number. That's all. That's all. It's just a negative number. It just means that there's relationships that are mostly in the negative. Companies that have a lot of negative can collapse, leaving people that they have relationships with in the lurch. It's difficult. It's challenging. Okay? So this application of negative number, but also you might want to think about how negative and positive have influenced, whether you like somebody or don't like somebody. If you don't like, that just sounds like the negation of like. No, people think it's actually the opposite. I don't like that person. As if it's the opposite. Or you think about mental states as being, oh, I'm in a good mental state, or I'm in a bad mental state. Or for example, being melancholic. Oh, that's negative. What? Why is it negative? Oh, it's because it's the opposite of being joyful. Well, possibly. What happens if it's just a lower state of joy, till eventually you don't really have much joy, and you got no joy. Okay? And then you're in a kind of melancholic state, if you want to call it that. There's no negative to that. And the projection of negative, to go, oh, I shouldn't be in a negative state. Ah, that's not a good thing. That's depression. Okay? It's the addition of one's mental evaluation, whether it is, oh look, positive or negative, i.e. what conditions we're in, will determine our future. So this way of thinking about mathematics, okay, gives us an insight into when we're doing this math, we've learned all this stuff, and we've been applying it to lots of things in society. Obliviously. We're not talking about academia with big theories, Marxism and so on and so forth. We're not talking about that. We're talking about this kind of very subtle influence of our psychologies based on maths. Okay, and we're doing it incorrectly. We're implying this maths of objects willy-nilly. Okay, it's almost like a mental pollution. Okay, and we're abusing kids quite a lot with the way that we teach. Okay, because a lot of the time when we're teaching kids, we're teaching them like counting this, counting that, and you have to add people, numbers, people are things. And it's all just about objects, whereas it's temporal. If we start thinking about mathematics as process, i.e. the mental process by which I could do the maths, it means again we have a relationality, we have reflexivity. Okay, so we're starting to think about our temporal condition as we do this, and other people's temporal condition as they are doing mathematics. Therefore, maybe there are different kinds of mathematics that exercise our mental processes in different ways. And I have absolutely no doubt, as a mathematician, as a teacher of mathematics, that there was a relationship between the level of abstraction of algebra, okay, and the metacognitive level of adolescents as they became aware that they're actually in a class with a bunch of people. Not just as children just like looking at each other, but actually be metacognitive. You might have experienced this. There's a kind of an accelerated self-consciousness that occurs when we were teenagers. Now this kind of talk that I'm introducing now, it's going a bit into psychology, okay, which is maybe this one, psychology. But it's actually, that's the first time I've actually termed it. A bit like religion and spirit. Because that's a little bit too objective, trying to study the psychology of another human being, okay, and then try to apply that to your own brain, okay, your own mind. Whereas I'm interested in this thing called zero social distance. Zero social distance is where you start to realize that there are aspects of one's being that is correlating to other people's experience, okay, subjectively. So, a million of us watching this now, and if we're all moving at the same moment, in some way, potentially, we're skipping quite close, but slightly deeper level is this appreciation of zero social distance. It's not a matter of me, my friend, you. Okay, it's not these separate bodies. Okay, it's us collectively moving forward through time. Literally, as we're watching this video, as I'm going through this. And literally, we're on the same side. Okay, we're looking at this, and it's about the world. It's about things, it's about education, it's about academia. Like this transparent and this represented somehow or other the world. No. This is reflecting what I think. Great. And maybe if you're following that, you go, oh, can it reflect some aspect of what I think? Perhaps. But more so if we actually start doing these things. If we start doing these things, as your friend has done, in sharing this with you, it means they have operated the second social fact. They've actually done that. But you haven't yet. You're only participating by watching it. It's only if you share it forwards does that become, yeah, this is happening. And because you've made that happen, that number has just increased. Potentially, it's still up to the next person to watch this. And it's for them to go, oh, and they've just joined us. Oh, hello. So the person that you're going to share it with, oh, they're here. All right. So if there's only 10 people who watch this, or 100 or 1,000, And that million hasn't been reached yet according to your chronological moment. Just like my friend. Obviously there aren't a million people watching this. I'm not famous, I'm a nobody. And again, that's what this is about. This is about us sharing nobody to nobody. There is no broadcast. I'm not a performer. I've got social anxiety. I can't get in front of a bunch of people and talk to them. I could do kids and stuff because there's an acceptance in some form or other because I'm talking in a certain way that's kind of natural. Whereas adults, they want information delivered in a certain way, in a certain structure, and it has to be meaningful. That actually either fits into the structure or they're like it's just entertainment. Oh gosh, fantasy. Give me some fantasy. Okay. And what I'm saying is, look, we're all rather confused. The world's melting. Okay, or parts of it going on fire. And we've got economic, political instability. We've still got nuclear bombs, masses of them, all right, in political structures that are tipsy, let's just say, historically tipsy, like a bridge that's been built 60 years back, and the concrete's starting to get a bit, the metal girders within it are actually rusting. Okay, the concrete's starting to disintegrate, and it kind of needs an upgrade. Oh, okay, we'll put in reinforcements. I say the whole thing needs revision. We're human beings. We've done enough. Let's get together properly. So we start talking about something like the third social fact. What is the purpose? Yes, there's only 2 of us or 1 million of us. It doesn't matter what your respective position is or mine. There's nobody. Look, I'm in a room alone. Will my friend watch this? I hope so. Yeah? Okay. I think my friend will watch this. Great. But will they share it forwards? It's up to them. That's not my deal. I'm not putting any pressure on them. However, if we want to have any significant thing happening in this world, I'm just alone, I'm just a nobody. But if we want to achieve something like hitting 1 million people, we don't hit 1 million people. That's kind of targeting the audience. No, if you're going to hit me with your attention, hopefully you're not going to hit me with your attention. But if we have 1 million people and £1 million, right, let's get this. What are we in? Right, 50 minutes in. What's our collective purpose? What is the point of David going yabbing on about these alternative things? Just to recap, I developed this over 30 years. Okay, 30 years. And I'm a nobody, nobody's paying attention. But that's the beauty of this. Okay, if this works, this is going to work quickly. This is a viral thing. We're talking about 20 steps. If people watch this, okay, it takes an hour. And wow, this is actually quite good. I'm going to share it with 2 people like now. Okay, 20 hours later, we've got £1 million. 30 steps, we've got 1 billion. I don't expect that to happen in 30 hours. But it's possible. Okay, why? Because we've got the tool for it. I put blood, sweat and tears and a lot of money. Well, all the money I had very little money. Okay, I've been a teacher. Okay, and even a part-time teacher at that. So I've got no money. But we've developed this tool. So we've got all these systems working. The Economic Sqale app is actually working. The reflexive reading, I've written up the papers. Guess what? Do you think my supervisors in my PhD accept that? No, they don't. Why? Because they're in silos. They don't accept it because they want to hear a theory. They don't want to have somebody from a practice person, a practitioner from education to come into academia and go, you do realize, I'm not going to provide a theory and an argument, but you do realize that you're reading, yeah? Can you accept that you're reading? Oh, I don't know. You are reading. They can't accept, academics can't. You are reading this here and now. Is that true? Why? I don't know why. That's purpose. Okay, that's a bit later. But can we just start with the fact that you can verify that you are actually physically reading this and you're mentally constructing meaning for that to make any kind of sense? And if you verify that, wow, that establishes a social science. Nope, they can't accept that. But it's there, I've written it up, and you can check it out. Page 18, you are reading this here and now. Oh yeah, that's true, great. And if social sciences accept that, we can really shift academia. You sharing this, we can really shift economics. I mean, this is not just for this is for any digital content, you know, an article, a film, a video, anything that you want to share that you think is valuable, an article in a magazine, you think, whoa, that's really good. You know, it's political, all right, share it with people that you value. And if they value it, they'll share it forwards. And we generate the money for authors, for writers that are stuck within these hierarchies. So they can do the journalist job properly, rather than have to work within a structure that's got some kind of political, you know, paid by owners to, whatever it is, okay? We've got individuals that are generating revenue because they're producing things that are maybe true or insightful or something, you know, uplifting. All right, let's give that person a little bit more cash. And let's move things forward. Now so we can change academia, we can change economics. The XQ, well, have a look at that. It's there. I've written it up. Is it useful? It might be for us socially. That's what Sqale is. Sqale is kind of applied XQ. ABC state. That's in education. I've written that up. Can schools go, right, let's use this ABC state. Let's try it. Or can an individual teacher within the class do it? Yeah. They'll just try it. Just start. Just tell the kids, ABC, based on self-discipline, what I said to you, takes a couple of minutes, and then just track ABC every day. And if it's a C class, it's a bit dull, because you have to make sure that they're getting on with their work. You're a police person. If it's a B, it means you're not allowed to discipline them. You're still accountable for everybody's safety, but you're not responsible for their learning. That's not your job. Your job is to give them interesting activities. And if it's a B state, they'll have to do it. And if it's an A state, get so much done, it's amazing. Okay, so that you can start doing that, and we can shift education. You know, imagine a whole bunch of adults coming out of education that are actually capable of socially engaging, really competently. They haven't been taught collaboration, they just can collaborate. Why? Because they can prepare themselves mentally. You know, this whole thing about mindfulness, well, if you've got an A state, mindfulness is a thing that young people can understand. If you give it to a C state, that's definitely giving them cake. Okay, that's right. Fiction, fantasy, well, I don't know, have a read. If you like it, pass it on. If you don't, that's okay. Action cycles, give them a go. Try it. You know, wherever it is that you're in an organization, go, I think I'm going to try one of these action cycles. That's kind of good, but you need to have these horizontal players. It's that horizontal players that are actually quite good at working collaboratively. You know, they're kind of capable of producing A classes in business, you know, kind of consultants, but not just there to go, oh, well, I think we should change this, that, and the next thing. No. We're talking about facilitators, and they're generally women, okay, that are quite good at just getting a bunch of people working well together. And so you kind of need to find those people in order to do the action cycle in your company or your organization. But if you're one of those people that's good at facilitation, good at coming up with things to do with how to get people to work together, working on the individual, working on the collective, working on and teams and so on and so forth, then, you know, set up an action cycle with a friend that's in a company. Okay? And finally, this one, zero social distance. We can change, business with action cycle. And zero social distance, we can change basically, well, the pathology of psychology, and or even bring together religions. Okay, we need something. We need something that is common to the religious practices that we have. This is trickiest to describe, obviously. Okay, and that's why we've got religions, because the actual lesson, the actual experience is so subtle, and yet we've got all these kind of either massive texts around them, or, you know, hierarchies of people, or it gets loose. Okay, it means nothing. So the religions are attempts to try. They're kind of like almost like C states. Okay, as composed to spiritual A states. So zero social distance is something that we can kind of tag into, because globally we've all suffered. Okay, some of us have lost loved ones to coronavirus, and also just the hysteria of this disease has had massive effects economically. People losing jobs, and the financial implications of this beyond 2020 are massive. I mean, we hit a little bump in comparison in 2008, which led to 10 years of restrictions. And what were they called? Well, you know, massive squeeze in the UK with all our social services and so on and so forth. What's going to happen over the next 10 years because of coronavirus is going to be a further squeeze, and, okay, it's going to, I think, put a lot of pressure on our environmental desires, okay, because that costs a lot of money. There's a lot of intentionality in that, and there's a lot of risk to all of those practices for us to shift over towards environmental improvements. Why? Because we don't have a global agreement. And if we don't have a global agreement, it means that some countries might say, oh, look, I think we have to do these environmental things. We'll try it. And they can't do this alone, because if you do, you can't solve the problems in another country that are environmental because of the water and so on and so forth, the effects upon your country. Bangladesh, flooding, ice caps melting, more flooding. Bangladesh can't solve that problem alone. Okay, so there are certain countries that are like, whoa, we really have to move on this. And other ones are like, well, we don't really care. Okay, so because of that, it means that we cannot reach certain levels of solution. Okay, and so, all these things aren't good. And one of the worst ones is AI, okay, mathematics, and engineering and artificial intelligence. I talk about it. People have talked about it, like Elon Musk and so on, about the warning of what AI might bring. And I think it's the equivalent of a nuclear bomb. We had the Cold War after that. We had the Cold War and all that while we were industrializing and coming up with these massive companies, mass production, and just, the environment was just soaking up all the pollution. Okay, we managed to somehow or other survive through that, but it was dodgy. And with an AI, and with our economic stability, and with the environmental pressures, and with this level of coronavirus effects on our economies, and we know that capitalism's kind of got to its last kind of run, potentially, it's under pressure. Wow. Okay, lost a friend there. So we're alone here. All right, guys, we're alone. I'm alone. You're alone. And yet, we're part of something. What? So I'm going to very, very quickly say, well, what's our collective purpose? Well, for me, global unity. Global unity. Okay, that's the third. The third for me, okay, it's social cohesion. And that's what the result of the first and second social fact is, social cohesion. But that's just kind of like the equivalent of collaboration. It's kind of like an empty word, social cohesion. What does it mean? Well, it means global unity. Because we're playing around with an alternative economic. And if that economic distributes money equally, wow. Okay. And in fact, that economic gives us a transition to a non-monetary system. So it's got a one-to-one, say, where you share something with money, but at some point or other, even that function might dwindle away. I suspect it will. I've kind of looked at it and I think it will. Because the other part of the aspect of money as a vector, it points towards a future objective. It works like a vote. It works like weighted democracy. Weighted democracy, which is something people have talked about, and that's just not emerged, all right, with our current political structures and so on and so forth. It's quite difficult to do. Whereas if we've got this, we finally fit into politics. If politics is kind of based on the economic, economic is underlying it. Whereas if we change the economic, money as a vector, it starts treating money as a vector. And therefore our intentionality, and then we have transparency in where our money is going, then that's a different politic. It's a completely different politic. And we're talking about global unity. Okay, and we're talking about, we have to do it within, for example, 20 years. 20 years. Okay, it's not going to happen, 50 or 100 years, because the environmental distresses, the advent of AI, it's just, so we need to work quite fast. But luckily we've got the tools to do so. But it's not just a matter of using Sqale, it's not just a matter of trying to consider these alternative ways of thinking about mathematics, or producing another generation of young people, young adults that are capable of working collectively in ways that adults find remarkably difficult at the moment. It's not a matter of having just a social science that's actually relationally based, rather than just philosophy or objectively conducting science. And we're not just watching fantasies, we're actually watching things and being creative in our consumption and production of our fantasy world. And we're operating business in a completely different way. You know, we're not interested in, oh, it's not business as usual. Well, it's not business. This is very, very different. If we're using an alternative economic, it's all about collaboration. And, you know, we're changing our social psychology, I guess, by saying zero social distance. We're making use of this horrible experience that we've been through, almost in preparation for the next thing to happen, even more virulent form of coronavirus, which will probably happen at some point. Okay, and look how we've responded to this one. So, if this is our objective, to have global unity, so that we are capable of maybe dealing with environmental levels of disorder, to deal with the next COVID, okay, or the AI we're going to get, and the massive amount of transformation that AI just generally will affect our economies. Okay, how are we going to get to global unity? Okay, so when we're talking about 1 million people and £1 million, that's a drop in the ocean, as anybody knows. We're talking about trillions, okay, bazillions in terms of trading every year. Trillions are being traded every day, every picosecond, billions. No, we have to get control of this money thing. Okay, that's one thing, scale. But it's to do with people. So we have to put it all together. It's people. This is all about our psychosocial space. This is not just about doing one. You know, you like one, go for it. But it's in concert with the others. Okay. So what could we do with £1 million? Well, if we generated $1 million while we're watching this, what could we do that for? Well, what could we do with, I don't know, 1,000? 1,000 of us? Okay, let's say 10 quid. This is worth, okay, let's just say 1,000 pounds. Whether that's 1,000 people or 10 people giving £100 or 100 people giving £10. If we've got £1,000, what do we do? If it's £10,000, what do we do with it? £100,000, what do we do with it? I haven't thought about this. It's the kind of thing I should think about, but I'm not very good at thinking about these things. Or maybe you've got some ideas. Write them in a comment. So you put in a value, I think this is valuable. Well, I think, and you might have a goal here, you might know what we can do with £1,000 or £10,000 that we could do actively with, 1,000 of us, or 100 of us, or 10 of us. If we had £1,000, could we use £1,000 between 10 of us, or just one of us? £1,000 one of us? Okay, a million, 1,000 of us. And each one of us gets £1,000. That's good. Do you see the maths? You start thinking like this, and this is how it works. Okay, that's 1,000 of us. £1 million, 1,000 of us. Each of us gets £1,000. To do what? What do 1,000 of us do that deserves £1,000? What do we need the £1,000 for? Or is it just something that we do, and we get paid £1,000? Or does it need £1,000? Okay, and so by extension, 100, 10, 1. So if there's £1,000, first £1,000, we say, right, let's give that to a person to do something, follow on this video with something that has a higher chance of going viral. That's a specific thing that really has a greater chance of going viral and maybe, showing what Sqale is, or maybe it's one of the others. I think that the Sqale one is important because if we get the economic and everybody on the planet gets the economic, has an experience of these, goes, oh, what's this? Oh, it's an alternative economic. And they've been given money with it. Right, right. Some people will try it. And in the experiment of different people trying it, sharing music and videos and articles, or educational things, or Buddhist texts, or whatever it is that they want to share that they think is valuable, and it goes viral and it finds people and it crowdsources, and it starts becoming this very positive cycle. There's no negative in it. There's no negative. Okay? Yeah, that's what we need. So I think that I suspect that Sqale is probably the most important one to get into people's hands. Because then all the other ones can be operated almost just like freely. Okay. Yeah. Okay, that's it for me. Okay. Thank you very much, my friends. Okay, I might not know you, but we are. We're all together in this. Okay, that's kind of almost like the starting point. And it's got nothing to do with how many have actually watched this so far, it's got to do with how many people will in total. Okay, and not even watch this. If we're going to go, and here we go, Okay, I'm going to give you this because I came up with this before. If you consider the possibility of world peace, and world peace is only feasible if we have global unity. Global unity is almost like a psychosocial product. Okay, we're part of this thing. And we can deal with the environmental, and we can deal with the socio-political environment, and stabilize that, and deal with the coronaviruses, and deal with other things, right? Because we're a global unity. Okay, and we're talking about an A state, not a C state. Global, we're not forcing things. It's like, this is working. We're quite happy together in some form. Now, in order for that to happen, even the possibility of it means you have to consider that it's possible. If you don't think it's possible, if anybody doesn't think it's possible, that's okay for them. But in order, and this system can work with people going, well, I don't think that's happening. Fine, but it is. Okay, and the reason why it is because there are enough people who believe it and are operating enough tools. But an important part of it is to consider the possibility of it before it happens. Okay, so whenever you're engaging any other human being, you can sit there and go, well, that's the only way we're going to get it, is if we're open-minded to it. So it doesn't matter if somebody says no or yes, or they're aware that they're participating in a kind of massive social experiment towards achieving global unity. That doesn't matter. It's not about information, it's not about understanding, it's about going, a possibility. And that possibility is incontrovertible. It cannot be excised from a human being. It's just a possibility. And maintaining that possibility. And I think that the more people that think that, and I think the only way you can do that is by having these experiences. Okay, trying some of these things out, going, oh, this is working. So I think that I've provided enough evidence, okay, that you could possibly go, okay, maybe. Okay, and in that possibility, maybe. And when you engage anybody else, and if that has happened to you while you've watched this, it's not, I just said that wrongly, it's not like a conclusion. But if at some point you went, okay, there's some possibility here or something, it might not be global unity. But if some people have considered that possibility, you don't have to push that. It's not a thing to persuade anything of. Okay? It is the third order social fact. It's not something you can do anything about. You can do stuff at first, you can do stuff at the second, you just interact with people. But the third is the result of a collective result. Global unity is a collective result. It's a thought maybe, you might want to talk about it, but I'm not convinced. It's like talking about God, it gets into complicated areas. It's the consequential effect. You can talk about a state, fine, but that's talking about it. The trick is to get a state. Okay? It's about getting a social cohesive state. Okay? Talking about collaboration, well, fine. Or doing tango, talking about tango, fine. Okay? But it's actually doing it. Okay? It's doing it. So we have been doing something now together. Okay? It's mind expanding. Stay cool. It's fine. We just need to do a few things, and if we do those things, we will get a social result. Social result. Money flow, people empowered to do things. Please value this. If anything pops into your mind, put it into the comment, and subsequent people, or people before, will look at your comment, look at your value, maybe find, oh, this person thinks it's a 10. Why? If you think you've got something to move this forwards, give this a 10 and stick something down there. And other people go, oh, that person thinks it's a 10. I will look at it. I'll go, ooh, 10. Why? Ooh, you've got a good idea. Look, that's different. Ooh. So can you share something? And I will try. Independently of whether this is successful or not, you can start sharing this idea with me. Work on it a little bit, and then share it with me and other people. Maybe we can actually get something to happen. Maybe you're already doing something. Okay. And so we need to share how we're drawing attention to each other and helping each other with money flow and attention and our action. First, second, and therefore the third social fact, the social cohesion. Okay. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for imagining. Thank you very much for action.